Hello, and welcome to the SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting for Tuesday, July 10th, 2018. Today, I put a couple of quick FYI things at the beginning of the agenda. The first is that the steering committee has been poking folks to get their charters for SIGs in. I looked at the spreadsheet, and we do not have a PR open yet for a SIG charter. We do have two reviewers from the steering committee assigned, which is Brian Grant and Joe Beta. And so unless anyone else wants to do it, I was going to go ahead and take the SIG mission statement that Justin Santa Barbara wrote up for us a little while ago and sort of recast that into the SIG charter template and start a PR. At that point, I'd love for people on the call to take a look and make sure it looks okay, and then we'll assign it to our steering committee reviewers.
Can you wait on that maybe for like a day? I have to go through to this afternoon. Phil, myself, and Aaron and Derek have to go. We're reducing the template because we have seen a bunch of issues with the template. So the basically repetitiveness in roles and responsibility. So we're trying to see what we would like and what we don't like, and trying to get that fixed up. So I can probably give you concrete feedback and better feedback in one day.
That would be great. Yeah, it looked like we were supposed to be doing this, and they were sort of pestering people that hadn't done it yet. So I thought we should go ahead and do it. But if it makes more sense to wait a little while and let other people do the first couple of them, then we can certainly wait, even a couple of weeks if it's not urgent. It's
currently on hold from the steering committee perspective because we want to reduce it and then have a standard way that we apply the evaluation of it. So we are going to meet about it and talk about it today. So.
Okay. Yeah, I think Michelle had sent out an email recently to SIG leads asking for PRs. So.
Yeah, I just give us like a day and we can talk about it.
Excellent. Maybe we should just punt for a week and talk about it next week if it's not urgent. That sounds great to me. Awesome. The second one is we got an email from CNCF asking if people wanted to sign up for either SIG introductions or SIG deep dive sessions for the two upcoming KubeCons. The first one being in Shanghai, China, and the second one being in Seattle for North America. And I was going to respond and grab spots for up to all four of these sessions in the two different locations, as long as we have people to run them. So I think the Seattle one should be pretty easy. I think plenty of people from our SIG will be going to the Seattle one because it's local for a number of us. Either local in Seattle or local in North America. But it was more the Shanghai one that I wanted to put out there and see if anybody is going to Shanghai, and if so, would they be interested in running a SIG session?
I'm not going to either, or possibly next year in Europe again.
I don't think anyone at Heptio is going to the Shanghai one. We will definitely be at Seattle.
Yeah, I think there might be, I know at least one person from Google here submitted a talk for the Shanghai one, but I don't know if he will go if his talk doesn't get accepted. So he's also fluent in Mandarin, which would be convenient to run a SIG session in that location. Okay. So I'll definitely sign up for the two slots for Seattle because I think that'll be pretty easy for people to staff, for our SIG to staff. And I'll hold off on the Shanghai one, although the due date for that one is much sooner. So if anyone is interested in doing that, please, poke me or Tim in Slack, and we can get that spot reserved. At this point, it doesn't seem like we're going to have enough people there to warrant signing up for sessions. All right, next on the agenda, Fabrizio, who said he wouldn't be able to make it today, linked to a tracking issue, let's see, with the latest contributions from Lucas. I wasn't here last week. Is Lucas officially out? I saw on Twitter that he was about to join the military, but I wasn't sure what his status was.
Yes, he was supposed to be out this week. Yeah. Okay. So I'm aware of the details because I was on review for a lot of the stuff. It's basically the transformation from V1 Alpha 2 to either V1 Alpha 3 or proposed beta. We still need to determine whether or not we can actually get all the way to proposed beta because of some of the other dependencies on other component config items. I will happily be involved in this work, and I will loop Liz in on the that stuff too as well.
Cool. Are there any updates you wanted to give about the KEP updates?
Most of it's pretty straightforward. I think he's got two different KEPs, so I don't know which one this one is that he's talking about here.
It just says V1 Beta 1 API KEP.
Oh, that one's pretty straightforward. I mostly agree with all of the details that are there. I think we just need to be able to run through and execute on some of them, and I know he's already done portions of it. So I'd have to verify from the document and the tracking issue what has been done and what still needs to be done. I've also been out since like Fabrizio was merging a bunch of the PRs. So.
Okay, so maybe the TLDR here is if you're interested in Kube API or kubeadm V1 Beta 1 API changes, you should go take a look at the Google Doc and add comments before it turns into a PR.
No, it's already a bunch of PRs that are already merged. But like we should definitely see, we should go through with a fine-tooth comb and update the issues.
Yeah, I'm assuming he made a Google Doc instead of a PR out of it to make it easier to have comments on.
We might need some help with some of the issues at the bottom of the tracking issue. Like, basically, if there are volunteers that want to help us, please go ahead, because there are a lot of subtasks here.
Liz and I were actually talking this morning, and this afternoon we were going to go through some of the backlog and kind of go through and triage some of the issues. So our plan later on this afternoon, if folks would like to join us, happy to loop them in. Please just send me a message on Slack, and we can walk through some of the backlog together as a broader subsection of the SIG that are interested in executing on pieces of this.
It's going to be a Zoom meeting?
Yes.
What time approximately from now?
Let me look at my calendar. Liz said not 2 o'clock Eastern time, I believe is the requirement. So we might be able to do maybe even shortly after this meeting, if that works. Liz, do you have a time preference?
Just sometime after 2 or so I can eat lunch.
Okay, sometime after 2. So maybe 2 p.m. CST, which is 3 p.m. EST.
It's going to be in the middle of the night for me, and I have to leave after this meeting. So I wish that I can join. Maybe others can.
Okay.
We can record it as well.
Excellent. So I've added the next entry. It's about an issue that we have about Raspberry Pis mostly. You've seen this one. It has been in the repo for quite some time. Basically, slower devices try to start the control plane, and they fail because we have aggressive timeouts for the liveness probes. And there are no easy solutions here, but I was thinking like maybe we should talk about it because the demand for this is increasing.
It's up to people who want to contribute to work on this, to be honest. I originally triaged and looked at it, and then I was like, from a company perspective of Heptio, it is not in the, it's not, we don't actually have any Raspberry Pi targets. I don't, and most of the other folks don't. Some people do, but their own personal things. And it's not an aggressive thing that we are actively pushing. So from a community perspective, I think asking folks who have Raspberry Pis and care about this aspect to help contribute patches here, because I'd be happy to review them because that's part of my responsibilities anyways. But I'm not actively pursuing it. That's the reason I put the help wanted tag on it.
So I guess the question here is, because I can take care of this, not that my company wants me to contribute to this, but I've basically seen the demand for this feature. Like, I can work on this, but I don't know where to put, like, is it going to be a flag? Is it going to be a command line option or environment variable? Basically, we need some decision making on how to solve this.
You can always put forth an idea or proposal. There are like 3 proposals in that issue, if I recall correctly, and it's all about delaying, for the most part, the liveness checks, or increasing it, or having a variable that you can set as part of it. I think there were a couple different ones, but from my perspective, I can't even see the behavior because I don't have a super slow Raspberry Pi. This isn't even Raspberry Pi 3s, it's only 2s or earlier. So like I don't even have the gear to create the issue.
So I was also thinking about our alpha commands. I mean, I'm not sure this is a good option, but potentially something like that can be added on the alpha and backported to a previous version. Like people can use this feature for a while until we add it in the config, because adding it to the config right now is kind of difficult because we are refactoring the config. And I was thinking about the alpha subcommands, but it's not really a good option as well.
I would say read through the details, because it's a long issue. Read through it in detail. And what they basically did was like crib out sections of the manifest to allow an option override. And ideally what they want is a config override knob, right, for this particular type of behavior. But I don't know, I haven't tested whether or not you can actually get that indirectly already, or whether or not you need to explicitly add this to portions of kubeadm.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible right now. The manifests are hard-coded, and you cannot adjust these timeouts for the liveness probe, basically. So Lucas said that there should be like a waiting flag or something, that if you add a coefficient to a parameter in kubeadm, it basically adds a value to all the timeouts in there. Basically, somebody also took a fork of kubeadm and hard-coded new values that are much larger than this, and it started working for him. But of course, forking kubeadm is a bad idea because the project is moving too fast. And I can propose to the guy that did the fork to make a proposal if he thinks that he has one, but he's going to encounter the same problem, that we need like a solid decision on how to fix this. We also removed version 1 alpha 1, and we cannot backport the change to older versions of kubeadm.
I don't think we should backport. This is net new behavior. Backport should only be for bug fixes only. So if this is a change in behavior and it's net new, it should never be backported in general.
Yeah, it's just the issue has been existing for quite some time already.
It exists for a finite subset of the people who use it as a test development target. But if other folks want to work on it and have proposed ideas, this is where the community steps up, right?
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say is looking at the code where we set these values, it seems like these values were cargo culted from the bash. That I don't know if we have any notion of why they were set to these values in the first place. Somebody on the comment thread suggested just increasing them globally, and would that actually be bad? And I don't know that it would be bad. We might want to check with the API machinery SIG and say, what should the health check for the API server actually be like, and should it be changing over time? Because I think people in the comment thread said it used to work on 1.8 and now it doesn't work on 1.10, right? And it's quite possible that the behavior of the API server, and especially the startup time, changes as they add new functionality, and that having static values in perpetuity is actually the wrong decision anyway. And so Tim, you also said that this doesn't matter because you guys don't have ARM as a target, but it's also possible that the old values we have in there are incorrect for Google or AWS also. Maybe they should be smaller so that we can detect failures more quickly. And I think a lot of times with these probes, it just seems to sort of work, and so we don't look too closely. Maybe
the magic,
look more closely.
What is it? How old am I? 10 years of cluster management say that magic numbers typically get baked into almost every single system.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it would be nice if we actually had some validation from the API machinery folks that like these are at least in the ballpark of reasonable numbers for starting the API server on a platform that they think is reasonable to support. Right?
I would really like 1.11 verification of this, because on the split of the config pull that we have now, there should have been, I always thought if the time delay is multiple seconds for a health check on the API server start for just the server starting, and we're already past that point, I can understand the delay on the actual image pull, but we have that as a separate step. So like,
it doesn't actually count. Like if you look at the comments, the initial delay, it's from after the image is pulled, we start running the API server, we wait 15 seconds, and then we start trying to health check it. And if we fail 8 in a row, we kill it and restart it. But on some systems, it takes multiple minutes for it to come up and actually respond and say that it's healthy. And so we will kill it before that happens. And you get into a case where it will never come up healthy because we always kill it too fast.
That almost seems like a race condition bug in the API server itself. It doesn't actually sound like it's actually, if your process is taking that long with 8 retries to start up, something is fundamentally broken in my mind.
Right. I guess this is what I'm saying is it doesn't seem like this is a place where we should necessarily add parameterization and make everybody able to pass custom values. We should figure out if there is sort of a correct prober config, or if there's something fundamentally wrong with the startup of the API server that needs to be fixed instead. Right. I think this is pointing to a problem, but the solution isn't necessarily add more knobs for the user.
Okay, I'm gonna ask the appropriate people for this to see if there's an actual problem. And I agree that not exposing such arbitrary parameters to users is a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I could see an argument for like, if we actually come back from the API machinery SIG and they say this should probably be configurable based on your platform, then maybe we need to create some parameters. But to date, other than these sort of older Raspberry Pi machines plus newer Kubernetes, right? So you're ending up with a larger time skew. It doesn't seem like this has been an issue.
It's also a problem. It's not only about the Raspberry Pi market. It's a general problem for smaller machines. So that was my primary concern about this.
Have we seen any evidence of it not working on other small machine types? Like if you take like the smallest virtual machine on Google or Amazon, do we see this problem, or are the timeouts large enough for those to work?
I haven't seen reports for that because, and I haven't tested it myself because I don't have a small virtual machine in disposal right now.
I've never seen it for the smallest, even the time-shared CPU instances.
Yeah, and I know that some people at Google are experimenting with, can we run a control plane on the smallest Google VM, and I have not heard them complain about this either.
I think the biggest problem with exposing these as parameters is I don't know how we would even explain how one would begin to set it.
Yes, definitely.
Right. So I think the reasonable path forward here, we should talk to the API machinery folks. It might be reasonable to just set the default to be higher, to be, maybe the initial delay is higher so that it works in more cases. If we don't think that's going to be detrimental to the places where it is working correctly today. The downside of making the initial delay start at 60 seconds instead of 15 seconds is that if something is actually broken, it'll take longer to detect. Right?
The argument from Lucas here was that kubeadm users are not humans all the time, like they're automated processes, so we don't want to hard code a large value here.
Well, the only thing that the large value here will do is it'll make it take longer for the kubelets to kill the API server if it's not coming up healthy. But if you have an automated system that's using kubeadm, it's probably also waiting for the API server to be healthy itself, right? Like the cluster API right now, when it creates a cluster, it sits and pulls the API server to wait till it's up and running, right? And I would expect other automated systems built on top of kubeadm to do something similar because they need to know when they can actually talk to the API server to do the next step in provisioning. So I'm not sure that's actually going to affect higher level systems.
It should just work if it's automated, yes.
Okay, so Luberman, you volunteered to take the action item to keep pushing this forward. Thank you so much. All right, that gets us to the end of the agenda. Does anyone else have things that they'd like to tack on, or should we take half an hour back? Tim?
As we mentioned, the backlog is mostly groomed. I know we did a first pass grooming last week, and Lubomir added a lot of the things that we did from planning. And I'm going to go through the stuff that Lubomir added to try and see if we need to assign some other folks that we know can dedicate time to it. So we're going to do that this afternoon, as I mentioned earlier. So I think we should be ready to go for mostly for 112. There are broader level discussions. I see Ben is here, so I'm going to poke him. There are broader level discussions about what we plan on supporting for CRI and what that even means for not just kubeadm, but like Kubernetes, because there's a lot of marketing and there's not a lot of meat that behind some of the statements that are made. So typically for 1703, that's the most validated version of the CRI that we verify across the entire space, from kubeadm deployment all the way through to the actual Docker instance that's run. We have a large swath of tests that are run. We have the upgrade tests that are run. People independently can run scale verifications against them, but none of that jiggery exists for kubeadm deployments of different CRIs. And I don't exactly know if we are going to quote unquote pontificate that a CRI is supported by Kubernetes without us having a lot of this basic plumbing and jiggery in place. I don't know how we can actually make some of those statements.
It also feels to me that like the kubeadm tool is work in progress. I don't want to offend anyone, but there are a lot of issues with this tool. Like, it's not really a replacement. It's not really a complete wrapper for Docker, it seems to me.
No, it's not intended to be a complete wrapper. It's intended to be more of a debugging tool, but you're definitely right. It is still nascent. It needs a lot of work.
So in that sense, it feels like, I mean, it's too early to claim that we support all the CRIs out there because we cannot depend on kubeadm for this.
Well, I mean, what do we lose if we can't support them all?
Well, the question is, there's this weird mismatch of marketing that exists on the Kubernetes blog that was created by other parties with what actually exists, and we get issues that are filed against kubeadm but we have no test signal. So there's this weird mismatch of expectations and reality because of the marketing that's been published. So the question is, are there folks who are going to lay down the test apparatus and be on the hook for when issues pop up along the way? And is this something that, as a SIG, we want to first class? I know that some people in the SIG, Alexander in particular, would like to be able to support a mixed CRI environment. And Lucas did his level best in the changes he made to the config to allow that type of support for a mixed CRI type of environment, so that the ability to publish back in the metadata the runtime, so when you do the upgrades, it can fix some of the problems. So I don't know who's on the hook to make this thing go.
I think the demand here from companies and individuals to use like something other than Docker, I would suggest that these folks invest into contributing to tool, and basically helping us to provide support for the other containers, because right now we're kind of tight. And this is open source. I mean, people, if they want to push something forward, they should start contributing to the whole ecosystem and not only to kubeadm.
But there's a fundamental problem in the fact that the marketing was mismatched and was published without other stakeholders being involved as part of that publishing, right? So like it makes it sound like Containerd is first class, and for better or for worse, and Cryo is first class. But I know Red Hat has the apparatus to verify that in place already because they ship OpenShift with it. But that doesn't mean that we have the apparatus for kubeadm deployments all the way through, right? So this marketing mismatch is a source of frustration and a source of issues that I don't know who is on the hook or what buttons we can press, other than we can go to SIG architecture and other people to try and make a forcing function somewhere, but or who is actually actively in the community trying to make this go.
Right, and this is also related to the email that Yuju sent recently about the Node EDE tests starting to use Containerd, right?
Yep. Go ahead, Ben. You unmuted.
I'm not sure about all that, but I am in contact with a few of these folks, including Yuju, and discuss testing with them regularly. I know they are contributing to Craigcuddle, the couple of Node folks near me that are working with Containerd stuff, and I know they have a pretty large dashboard tracking Containerd. It sounds like the main ask here is kubeadm testing specifically.
It's a piece of it, not all of it though.
Yeah, I guess one interesting thing here is as we get different variations, so we have different network overlays, we have different container runtimes, you know, each of these sort of different pieces of Kubernetes that we break out and create an interface and create multiple implementations for is increasing our test space exponentially unless we can actually test them independently and have some confidence that putting them together later will work, right? So if the Node team tests each of the CRIs that they want to support themselves, but don't add tests for kubeadm, and then we have users that use one of those CRIs that the Node team says should work with kubeadm and it doesn't work, then it seems like we have a failure in testing somewhere. And adding a whole nother test suite for kubeadm for every CRI, and then multiplying that by every network overlay, Calico, Flannel, et cetera, is going to blow up the test suite to become unmanageable, right? So it seems like we might need a sort of different way to think about testing and integrating these components.
The test suite is already unmanageable.
Right. I mean, these sorts of like multi-part configurations, though, make it incredibly more, you know, higher order magnitude, right?
I hear that, but there are like, you know, 3 CRIs mainly at this point. I think there's CRIO, there's Containerd, and then there's just the Docker shim. I think we can probably get better coverage for those in the meantime. I will talk to some folks about that and see what they think.
I think it'd be greatly appreciated because we lack the testing when we do a release, even though we've added some features into kubeadm. There's no constant CI signal that pops back.
Tim, you know what the status of testing Calico versus Weave versus Flannel, et cetera, is right now in our automated testing?
I know that they ripped out the Calico tests. We Heptio go through our validation for Calico for every time we do a quick start release because we kind of recommend that. Mm-hmm. So we have signal that we feed back, and we've done updates to the docs periodically over time. So from that perspective, there is some signal feeding back into the system. With regards to Weave, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, I think we're trying to be vendor agnostic in kubeadm and saying, we'll support whatever you'd like to use. But for our own sanity and supportability, we may need to say, here are the things that we actually test and validate. And the architecture is such that you can use other things, but it's sort of more at your own risk, right? Unless you're willing to step up and provide the test signal yourself.
I would love to have like a matrix that said like, you know, this has been tested or validated.
Exactly.
But I guess the issue reports are still going to come to the kubeadm repo, because people probably either going to miss the matrix or they're going to think that this is a kubeadm issue. And we really don't have people to poke because it's, in a way, our responsibility to solve these problems.
I think if we had clear documentation saying these are sort of the tested, validated configurations, and here are the other configurations that may or may not work. If somebody filed an issue, we could then say, oh, you didn't see our supported matrix, go check this out. And if you're outside of the range of things we support, then you're more on your own unless you want to contribute to the SIG and create test signal to ensure those things will work in the future, right? And I think that's sort of what Tim is saying is there some of these edge cases where anybody can come ask for a feature, right? But whether or not we implement that feature a lot of times is whether it's sort of aligned with the direction the SIG wants to go or the direction that the companies behind the people in the SIG want to go. And if you as a user or as a contributor want it to go in a different direction, because it's open source and it's an open community, you can then take it in that direction, right, through your own initiative, right? And I think that's what Tim was sort of saying about the earlier issue with the probers on ARM was, if that's not something that anybody particularly cares about in the SIG, then people can file the issue as much as they want, but that doesn't mean anybody's going to change it. Right?
Yes, we only have limited capacity in what we can do. We are not that many people anyway. So we can keep the issues open, but I guess the policy here is to start asking the people reporting the issues to help, because we need help.
Or just say there isn't a SIG contributor who, if it's not assigned and it has the help wanted flag, I think setting the expectation bar there is clear. Like, but maybe being more explicit. Like, this issue has been deprioritized by the contributing members because they don't have time or bandwidth to look at this particular issue, right? And if otherwise, typical open source mantras, patches welcome, right?
I think there was a recent change in the help wanted label. I didn't look at it in detail, but I think right now it needs like explanation why the help is wanted.
Just a bit. There's also, it was kind of forked into GitHub's help wanted and good first issue labels, and you should apply both if it's actually something that a very new contributor could handle, or just apply help wanted if it's something potentially less trivial.
Oh, I see. So it's a conjunction with the other label, because we oftentimes we just want help and we don't this is not a good first issue at the same time.
Exactly, right. It might be we want help from someone who's experienced, or we want help and this is a good place to start. Okay, so I think the action item there, Ben, you're going to talk to the folks on the node side working on Containerd and see if they can help add some test coverage for Containerd into kubeadm, because Containerd is one of a small number of what we believe to be sort of first-class CRIs that we'd like to have broad support in our test infrastructure for. Does that sound like a good summary?
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, I can't promise anything. Like, I won't probably personally be doing too much on setting up tests for this, but I will help with anything that they are, willing to maintain.
Do we have just as a general point of order, like, do we know how those blog posts were created and who kind of sponsored and allowed such things to occur? Not that I want to go hunt them down or anything, but they've basically caused a lot of consternation.
I see a lot of activity from Catherine Bernard and probably Zachary Sarah, who is Zachary. I don't know his second name. He is the maintainer of SIG docs right now, and I think that those people know. I can ping them because I'm seeing recent blog posts about core DNS and IPVS currently being reviewed. So I'm guessing you're talking about the same type of blocks?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna ask about it. Basically, there is an issue there because we don't have technical reviews for the blog posts, and SIG docs reviews them for typos and stuff, makes editorial changes as well. But I don't see a lot of technical people there who can basically argue about an issue. Today I saw that somebody is talking about C being a language which isn't memory safe, and I said this is not correct. Because you can write something in C that is perfectly safe. But so this blog post was missing a technical review, and again, this goes back to the process that SIG docs are not pinging us for reviews.
Well, I think any blog post perhaps should go. I mean, we're kind of stepping over our bounds of SIG cluster lifecycle, but I think in SIG Arch is a potential point. I was just trying to find out like who is the person that put this in the pipeline, and how. Then I'll go back to the other SIGs, like namely SIG Arch. Like they need to be on the loop for review of some of these blog posts before they get out the door for a release cycle.
Oh, there should be some sort of a delegate that basically knows who to ping about certain things.
Well, and I think we have that for sort of the main website documentation, right? Like I do see the website doc changes get pinged for technical review, we have a technical sign off. It sounds like we're just missing that step for the blogs. And we already have the list of people who maintain the website documentation for different features. And so if someone's writing a blog post where they talk about kubeadm, they should find the kubeadm maintainers of the website and loop those people in for technical review.
Yeah, oftentimes the docs PRs get approved without the technical review. And it's a cultural thing. Basically, you have to force ping somebody for technical review because like you get like misinformation.
I think that already exists today. Like the docs team does a lot of that. I also don't know that all these things are necessarily invalid. I do think there is there's somewhat of a failure here with kubeadm, but there is a lot of other testing going on. And this was, a multi-company post. I'm looking at it now. And to the other point, not that it's related, but being able to write memory safe code in a language does not make the language itself memory safe. Yeah, I think these things get pretty good review for the most part, but we should.
I think it needs,
with this again more.
Yeah, I do think it needs to bubble up to a point of SIG Arch, but this, again, we're kind of overstepping our boundaries on some of this space. My point of order was that we should definitely start to provide signal back to these other SIGs, including Docs, Arch, and Node, that they kind of push too hard on the CRI conversation without getting enough feedback and realizing what just happened across other SIGs, right?
I have one ask. Can you point me to some of the issues that popped up so that we know like what kinds of things are being missed in the test coverage, so I can also get a better idea of like Robert was talking about with having this huge matrix, so we can kind of figure out what the points that really need testing and integration are.
Absolutely, and we should probably file a meta issue on cryo control. Chuck, do you have a meta issue for that one?
For which one, sorry?
For cryo control.
I do not have a meta issue for that. What exactly about cryo control?
No, just the bakedness of cryo control or cryo control.
In terms of the actual thing, because they've got plenty of issues open on the CryTools repo.
I mean, as a start, we can attempt removing the docs which are incorrect.
Okay. Well, why don't I take it as an action item then to loop Ben into some of the issues that kind of are facing this area, and then talk to you about some of the test gaps that exist.
So I'm just asking SIG docs to see who is in charge of the blog posts.
Yeah, we can take the rest of the conversation offline. I don't think I need to take everybody else's time.
All right. Are there any other agenda items people would like to bring up? Going once, going twice. Great.
Happy Tuesday, folks.
Thanks so much for coming. We'll see people tomorrow at the breakout meetings or next week on Tuesday. Have a good week.